If you're in construction, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the Constructive Behaviors podcast. I'm your host, Barb Allen. I'm a woman with decades of experience in the construction industry, and most of it on the job site. I know how rewarding this industry can be, but like you, I also know that we could improve. Let's work together to make changes from the inside out. One of my all-time favorite movie lines is from Pretty Woman, when Julia Roberts says, "I'm a safety girl." I can't tell you how many times I used that line throughout my career on job sites. Now, granted, the safety precaution Julia was talking about and the safety precautions I was pushing were two totally different things. But when I would ask workers to put on their safety glasses, to get tied off, to wear a face shield, to put in their earplugs, or simply reinstall the caution tape, I would get pushback or the eye roll or the heavy sigh. And I love to follow up with, "I'm a safety girl." At least it usually made them smirk, maybe even laugh, but most importantly, do what I needed them to do. So, why am I talking about this? Why am I talking about Julia Roberts and Pretty Woman on this podcast? Because today's conversation with my guest, Rocio Luna, is going to be about the effect women have on a company's safety record and hence the company's insurance premiums. Now, it may seem a bit off topic from my typical interviews, so I want to tell you why we're talking about this. Recently, I heard someone use fear of an increased insurance premium as a reason not to hire women on the job site. I believe the actual comment was, "Who's going to pay for my increased costs when I start hiring women in the field and my safety rating goes up?" Or down, I guess. I was speechless. Even in this moment, I struggle to wrap my head around how a woman would make a job site less safe. So I decided to call in an expert. Welcome to the show, Rocio.
Thank you for having me on, Barb.
I am so glad that you're here. It was a random connection that you and I had. That conversation that I had heard, I immediately started thinking about how is this? Why does somebody even think this? And how do we disprove this? And randomly you popped into my LinkedIn feed. I swear Big Brother's always listening. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this woman is going to know answers to these questions. So tell the audience what makes you an expert on this topic.
Yes. So what makes me a workers' compensation claim specialist, and why I call myself a workers' compensation claim specialist, it is because prior to my sales role, I was a workers' comp claims manager for about 6 years. So I was managing workers' comp claims for an independent brokerage, meaning that I was dealing with all the workers' comp claims with all the clients, and that was across different industries. And to be specific, it was construction. That's why I have a passion for construction. It ended up being in construction. But going off on workers' compensation, managing workers' compensation claims, I pretty much saw it all. I saw, from death claims all the way to a simple finger cut, litigation across, subrogation, multiple contractors, one contractor. We have a commercial vehicle with workers' comp combined. I mean, I've seen it all. And why I call myself a claim specialist is because I really dealt with in managing those claims, lowering down the reserves, lowering down the EMR, and ultimately, we all know that when you close out those claims, get those claims under control, your EMR drops to rock bottom. That's why I have that little saying in my LinkedIn profile saying dropping EMRs to rock bottom.
Yeah.
And
Sorry. Yeah, I loved that. When I saw that, I was like, oh, that's fantastic. That's very catchy. I like it. So
yeah,
can you, for those listeners who may not yet be familiar with EMR, what does it stand for? How does it get rated?
so your EMRs are your experience modification rate. It's also known as XMOD. And the XMOD is basically a rate. It's a rate based from your company based on the amount of claims you've had and the payroll you've had in the past 3 years. So everyone pretty much has an EMR, and some people never hear about it because they never have claims. Now in the construction world, it's a little more high risk. So yes,
Sure.
there's you're more, the chances of someone getting hurt on the job site is a lot higher than someone at the office.
Sure.
So contractors are very familiar with EMRs because they use it to bid their work, especially for public contractors. You know, it's frowned upon in the construction world if you have an EMR above 1.25. And if you ever been in those high above 100 or on those leverages, or even, God forbid, in the 200s, you know the amount of pain it causes because the EMR determines the premium you pay. So it is an expensive, an expensive pain to hold in your company.
Well, and it's interesting to me that you said, people want to keep it below 1.25 because the idea of seeing someone that even has one at 1.0 would be to me as like, oh, they are not doing great. And granted, it's different. And I know there's so many factors that go into an EMR. I understand that certain companies will never get to a super low number because they don't have the number of hours or what. I don't know how all that works. I'm not going to pretend that I do. But I know as, I spent the majority of my career on the general contractor side, and we were always pushing, let's lower the EMR, let's lower the EMR, let's lower the EMR. Like, what are we going to do? What new safety processes? What are we going to, what are we going to do? But then when I transitioned to the owner's side of the business, and I've been on several building committees and also an owner's rep for a large multifamily developer nationwide. And we absolutely judged contractors based on their EMR. You as a client, as an owner's rep, you do not want your name, especially a high profile company. You don't want your name across the news, whether it's print or audio or TV. You don't want your name out there. So when you're interviewing those contractors, you want somebody that already has shown experience that they have a low EMR. What are your thoughts on the 1.0 versus the 1.25, and what are some of the best ratings you've ever seen?
Oh, best rating probably a 52, 52. That's
52.
yeah, 52. And it is possible.
Yeah.
So it the average low one is usually 72, but when you reach that 52 is because your payroll is actually twice as much as the average industry. So that's why you could lower twice as much.
Right.
However, the bad thing about that is that if that specific company were to have twice as much claims, then they would definitely feel twice as much pain as everybody else. But to your fact, yes, I mean, that's every contractor's fear, having their EMR go up. And I've seen it, and just to the impact it does, the EMR, it not only hurts your pockets, but when you feel that you're not getting the work, you're not even invited to bid certain jobs because you have a high EMR. And then let's say if you do bid the job, then you have to fill out 20 pages as to why your EMR went up, what active protocols are you doing to lower down that EMR. And I could tell you that every contractor wants to do the best for the company in the sense that they want to make sure that their employees are safe, that they're taking the proper protocols. And if they do have a claim, that there's an action plan to make sure that that employee is treated, and the insurance knows that they take safety very seriously, and they work along with a broker that is advocating for them. Because there's been instances where employers, when their contractors are a little more newer to the business, they don't know the impact of the EMR. They don't know that, this trip and fall, it was going to increase their EMR by 20 points. And now they're, scrambling around, not knowing what proactive measures to take. But yes, to your point, every contractor, every builder wants to get a subcontractor or a GC that has an EMR below 100.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's less risky.
Right.
Because if you were to bring someone who has 1.24, he's only 0.1 away from being that threshold, or this person's 10 times likely to have a claim than the other person.
Well, in the paperwork that you were talking about, I think you were talking about, when you have to refile for it the next year for your insurance and everything. Well, there's also, I know the last building committee that I was on, it was one of the contractors that we interviewed, their EMR was higher than we would have expected it to be. It was still under one or under 100, but it was still higher, and they knew coming into it that that was gonna be a thing, and so they were prepared for that question. They knew that, I mean, they had the answer for it. They knew when this big accident happened and when it would actually kind of, quote, unquote, "fall off the record," so that their rate would begin to go back to the rate that they were used to. But that's prep work that they've gotta take as well, and so I think EMR is fantastic because, holding people to their own devices of just wanting safety, wanting safe job sites, wanting people to be safe, that is a goal, right? We'd love for people to just feel that way, but we'd also just love people to hire women, right? But there's a when you start to show how things impact a pocket, that's when people start paying attention. And a bad EMR rating affects your pocket negatively. Now, hiring women typically affects your pocketbook in a positive manner, the way that women are able to actually increase revenue for a company. So let's dive into that part a little. That whole comment that I heard about this guy was concerned that, okay, if you want me to hire more women, then you're going to have to somehow compensate me for the increased insurance costs that I'm going to have. I mean, as a woman who worked on job sites for 19 years, I know that's not really a thing, but all I can say is based on my experience. You actually have data. I mean, um, when it comes to these accidents that are across the companies, well, I have so many questions for you. Um, so before I jump into the woman one, let me just ask, like, when you look at accidents in general, when you're reviewing that, how many of them are truly accidents and how many are this was totally preventable? Like on a percentage basis, do you have that kind of information to say what you have seen?
I would say it's a 30-60. So 30% it was a real accident, and 60% was total preventative. Like it was someone cutting corners, someone not wearing their PPP, someone, for construction, that's one thing that culturally, I think it is something that needs to change. I don't know if it will change, but construction is fast paced, fast
Mhm,
paced. Job needs to be done. There's
mhm.
deadlines. And once that subcontractor or the general contractor starts feeling that pressure, that's when you see claims. And that is because they are on this mission to get it done now, get it done fast. And when it's done at such a high speed, people cut corners.
Yeah.
And going back to your question, there's things that, there's random accidents that, yes, someone might have, slipped, maybe have a health condition where they feel a little agitated, or, their eyesight, because actually eyesight's a big thing in construction. They weren't wearing the proper glasses or their contacts. Um, so 30%, it is an accident, but I would say even 70% is preventative. A lot of the accidents could have been preventative by them wearing the proper equipment.
Well, and that to me is something that it makes me kind of laugh even a little more about the comment on women creating more incidents because it's usually, I mean, you think about even from a mothering standpoint, I don't have kids, right? But as a job site superintendent, as a carpenter foreman, I wanted to keep my team safe. And safety was in front of schedule. And no matter how hard somebody above me was pushing, if somebody gets hurt, we've lost any production that we sped up to get. And so safety was always first for me in that aspect. And so that wasn't always the case for my male peers. And so it just surprised me. But okay, so what have you seen related
I mean,
to women in the industry?
yes, I mean, I'm just gonna say worldwide, and I know this, you've heard and seen a statistic. men are more likely to die at a younger age than women. Women outlive men. And that is just a worldwide statistic. And why is that? Because women have a sixth sense and we actually don't take as much risk as guys do. And that's just a worldwide, I've seen so many, comedy, memes and things on the internet saying, oh, a guy would do this, or, for sure that was a guy, not a woman. There's a lot of memes. There is. And if I look back at, the drastic claims I've seen, honestly, I don't even think I could think of one woman, because that would have popped out in my head. All the claims I dealt with have been men.
Well, and when you were talking about women typically live longer. It also made me think about insurance related to vehicles. Unless something has changed, and once again, I don't have kids, but what I have heard from my friends is that insurance for male teens driving cars is higher than insurance for female teens driving cars. Is that true?
Yes, that's very true.
Well, and I think about, so I recently watched, have you heard of Jesse Combs?
No.
Okay. So I was on a flight and I watched this show. I think it was called The Fastest Woman on Earth. And it was an amazing show about Jesse Combs, who was like this amazing fast race car driver. She literally holds the record for the fastest woman on land in
Yeah,
the
I know
world.
who you're talking about now.
Okay. It's an amazing story, and plug your ears for the next 5 seconds if you don't want to know how it ends. But unfortunately, she does die breaking that record. But it's such an impressive story because she's a woman, right? Because it's not normal. I mean, the last person to do that record was, gosh, I forgot her name, Kitty something. And I mean, that was 50 years ago or something. And so women are not as big of a risk taker as men are, and yet somebody thinks that. So has there been are there kinds of accidents that you have seen that do tend to involve women more than men? Or are you just not seeing it?
Yeah, yes, but when it comes to the construction, and probably because, a restaurant has more females, and the restaurant industry has more females than, the construction industry.
Okay.
But yes, if I'm thinking about like the overall basis, nationwide across the nation, across it, I would say females probably cut themselves more.
Cut themselves more. That's interesting. Well, and that may, yeah, tied to the restaurant industry, I can understand that as well. So, you have an ebook out there, and I don't know that I wrote down the name of it. What's the name of it?
It's 3 harsh realities that increase your workers' comp premium.
Yes. And I read through that book, and none of them mentioned hiring women. None of those reasons are related to women. They were poor claims management, delayed reporting of injuries, and lack of SOPs in place, which I think is probably, I would guess, one of the biggest things is people just don't have a process for how things are supposed to happen. So talking about those three big harsh things, what can people, if they're just going to improve one of them, what do you think is the most important of those three?
SOPs.
SOPs. And
Yes.
is that something that you help people do, or is that how do you recommend they go about creating the SOP that's needed to help with their safety record?
Yes, so that is something that I do, and then that's something that I actually would do when I was a workers' comp claims manager. It's very simple, it's just a one document saying, if there is an accident, here's your insurance carrier, your policy, here's a phone number, here's your local clinic. Here is if it's a construction, I would state, here's a LA clinic near this space, here's, San Fernando, wherever you're located. I would always have at least 1 or 2 locations there. And I would also provide a mobile medical service. So I'm not sure if you heard about on-site safety and health. They're a pretty popular mobile medical service, and they only abide to first aid injuries. So
Mhm.
anything, cuts, lacerations, burns, anything that's first aid, they could deal with it. And it's a fast, easy way for an injured employee to be treated. Now, if the employee, fell, hurt himself, then yes, they need to be taken to the clinic,
Mhm.
and we need to have this reported to the supervisor, and then either the human resources or the operations manager, like all three people need to be in conjunction, because usually what happens when there's a claim and where it could go south is when there's no communication. So, if the employee gets hurt, he or she doesn't report it, it lingers on. And then a week later, they come back saying, well, I fell. Oh, I have no, there's no record of it. Okay, well, now I need to send you to the clinic. And of course, we're all humans. So that little small sprain is now, that little small fall, which could have been treated with ice, maybe a little bit of therapy, is now a strain, because now
Right.
you overwork that muscle, and now you're in some serious pain where you have to take some time off. And it just goes back into having that SOP in place, and then obviously reporting it over to your insurance carrier to say, to notify them, like, we've had this accident, depending on the severity, does this person, can they come back to work, return to work, or did they need to take a couple of days off or weeks off?
Well, I think that's super important. The communication chain, because like you said, if you don't have the SOP, then people don't know who to contact. And if they're not contacting, you don't know when it finally makes it to the person who actually usually calls the insurance, depending on the size of the company. And I think that there's a lot of fear because companies are so big on lost time days and not getting a lost time accident and wanting their EMR to be low, that people are afraid to report an injury, whether it's the person who got hurt or it's the person that they're reporting it to, their foreman or their superintendent or their project manager. Any of those people may feel like, okay, let's just keep this under wraps and see, let's see if it gets worse before we need to report it. And I don't think they realize that that actually costs the company more money than if they just go and report it.
Yes, and to go off on your fear base, that is very true. And that goes back into what dominates construction, the Hispanic culture. And what's very common in Hispanic culture? Machismo. So machismo is a big thing in our culture. I'm Mexican, and I had a very male dominant dad where, oh no, I'm good. That, leave that for the woman. Women are the ones, they need to go get treated. I'm a man, that man persona. And that is, I've seen that, like, still with my clients and some of their employees, like, oh no, 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 I'm good. I just need a good rub. And it's like, no, we need to document it, make sure that you're treated, that way it doesn't linger on.
Well, it's interesting you say that. So last week, and I'm not sure when this episode will actually drop, but last week from when we recorded this, I was in Costa Rica on a mission trip, and there were three Hispanic men that were leading the construction operation that we were working on. And on the very last day, one of them came in, and he was obviously not feeling well. He did not get hurt on the job, but it was very clear he was not feeling well. And so I went to our lead of the mission trip and said, "Hey, I know you have a medical bag. Maybe just check on him and see if there's something we have in the bag that would make him feel better, right? Because clearly didn't have anything with him. No matter, I don't know what he needed, but he did not feel well." And she came back to me and she says, "He said he's fine." I'm like, "He's so not fine." But okay, if he doesn't want the medicine, he'd prefer to feel bad all day. That's fine. I mean, I think that once again, that whole machismo aspect, it's not just Hispanic culture. I mean, it is ingrained in our construction culture as well.
Mhm.
We don't want to show weakness. We don't want to show that we're not well. We don't want to show that we're hurt. And all of that transitions into more dollars. And I think that's a way that women can actually help the bottom line of a company because they are more apt to say when something's wrong with themselves or with someone on their team and get the help that is needed in order to make the situation less impactful physically for someone and monetarily for the company.
Yes, and to go off your point, Barb, employers, I mean, everybody knows that there's a certain restriction, there's a certain weight. Females are obviously physically, we cannot lift as much as men do. And in no correct mind is any employer gonna put a female in some type of physical condition where they know that she won't be able to handle, weight wise. But in to your point, I've known a couple of clients that have had, usually where I see female workers, it's usually with drywall and painting. And with those couple of clients I've had who did those specific trades, I've never ever had a female report an injury or had the employer say, hey, this. If anything, she was probably the one that was working faster, doing what she was told, just following along and maybe even keeping the guys in line with their safety.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I did that a lot throughout my career. I was like, "No, you need your safety glasses. Here's your safety glasses," and um, it's man, I remember this one time I was on a job in Des Moines. I was the assistant superintendent on this $100 million job, and there was this guy who just never wore his safety glasses, and I just kept going to him like, "Hey," as soon as I'd walk by, he'd know to put them on because he knew I was going to say something. And I remember one day in particular, he came into my trailer and he's like beaming. He's so happy, and he shows me this pair of safety glasses that are wrecked because an aerosol can blew up in his face, and he happened to be wearing his safety
Oh
glasses.
my God.
And he was like, I was the first person he wanted to tell. He's like, "Look, I was wearing them because you told me to wear them." And it was just like, I still get chills thinking about that moment. Um, but you know what? He's probably worn his safety glasses since then. I mean, seeing what happened to his safety glasses, and he was so excited about it. But had I not continued and pushed him on that, I don't know that he would have done that. And that job had about 450 people on it, and I was the only woman. I'm the one pushing him to do that when there are 450 other people that could have been doing it. So I just, wrapping up that part, I just really think that um, if anyone listening hears someone say that as a claim, I think what we've brought to the surface today are just some points to help someone understand. I mean, we never want to attack someone with "that's stupid," right? Like we want to say, "Okay, why do you feel that way?" Let's understand what made them even think that. But I mean, Rocio brings up a really good point about how, women typically do live longer because they take less chances, and insurance premiums are lower for teen females than they are for males because they take less chances. So all of this information just backs up that no, women will probably actually lower your rates instead of increase them. Um, so a random question, still insurance related, but can you think of, is there a particular claim? I know you can't talk about companies or anything, but that was a really big claim that was completely preventable that the listeners could learn something from. I know I put you on
Yes.
the spot. I
I,
didn't
I'm
I
for,
didn't prep you with that.
I will forever remember this claim because I was 23 years old working. This is like my first year. It was very scary. It was my first year as being like, I guess, the full-time claims manager. And this, it was HVAC installer, and he was not wearing his fall protection. He was up 12 feet.
On a
Um,
ladder,
yeah, yes,
12
on a
feet on a
ladder.
ladder. Okay, without fall
And he
protection.
was installing or removing a part of the HVAC component. And we don't really know because nobody saw. They literally just found the body on the ground. He's alive.
Oh, he is?
Yes, thank God. Miraculously. But he fell through one of the pipes, and the pipe went through his rib cage, punctured a lung, And you could only imagine the fear, the agony of everybody saying, oh my God, like, what do we do? Like, there's a guy here and we don't want to move him, touch him, and there's blood. And this at that moment, the superintendent was a younger guy. It was his first time too seeing the claim. So he freaked out. Everybody was freaking out. So they called 911. And because there was no SOP in place that you're supposed to call human resources or the operations manager, they ended up calling 911, and I spent 6 hours trying to track down which hospital he was taken to.
They
6 hours.
didn't know.
Yes. No, nobody knew. Nobody went with him in the emergency room. Nobody. I don't know why, what in the right. I think people panicked and they just said, just take him, take him. And that's what I'm imagining.
Right.
I remember being 23 years old and I get a call from the superintendent saying one of my guys fell. They took him. There was a lot of blood. We got pictures, but we don't know where he's at. And his wife and his mom are calling me.
I bet they are.
They're calling me and I don't know what to tell them. And I'm like, well, you can tell them the truth. I'm like, you can't just say, he's sleeping. He fell asleep on the job. So that
So
was obviously you can imagine how that turned. That turned really ugly. Um,
there are numerous reasons that I'm glad you told that story. One, I think that too often people take ladders for granted. They think that I'm on a ladder, I don't need to be tied off. And I think people, even listening, would think 12 foot, wouldn't have thought to get tied off, even though it is a requirement to tie off over 6 feet, right? Um, and for me, that would, although I know it's a requirement, walking by someone on the job site, I would make them get tied off, but I also would not have seen it as that big of a hazard. Now, when they're on a ladder at the edge of the building and there's only cable and they're above the cable, and that completely freaks me out, right? I can see that, but 12 feet from a ladder, that is super scary. The other thing that I really took away from that story is I think, and I'm talking in generalities here, but in general, I think women are pretty good at handling situations in a calm manner. Now, with that said, I know some women who absolutely would not, right? I have been witness to multiple scary incidents throughout my career, but I've always been able to maintain my calm and so that I could manage the situation. I knew that that's what I was supposed to do at that moment, was to remain calm and figure out how everything what needed to be done at that moment. And I think that's kind of a superpower that a lot of women have. And I also think that it would be rare to find a woman that would put a man on an ambulance and not think about needing to know where he went to tell his family. Like at any time I've been part of one of those where we had to put someone in an ambulance, I'm like, who do you want me to call? Where are we going to tell them you're going? What do you want me to tell them at this point? Like if they're conscious, I'm able to say those things, or I'm immediately like, all right, who knows him best? Who can we find out? Who's going to call? Like it's a relational thing that women are so good at, that relational part, figuring out what to do next, who to call, where to find them, all of that. So I think it was a great story to wrap this up with, because it did go back to just another way that women actually help with safety on a job site. Before I wrap up with my last question, do you have anything that you want to add?
No, I mean, just to go back onto that's a scary situation. It goes back into you know, having the right equipment, when you're working, having make someone double checking, like, hey, no, that guy was actually a very experienced. I think he had over 35 plus years doing this. So I think that's why, the GC, everybody was like, oh, it's just him doing his normal job. Nothing's gonna happen. He's been here a million times.
Mm-hmm.
And that one time, that incident, it went back, and also to dive into the compliance aspect of it. This got really messy in the fact that there was, you know, the fact that the mom and the wife had to now get involved because no one could get a hold of this guy for almost 6 hours. that caused, some fear and anxiety with them. But now OSHA got involved because the employer failed to report this over to OSHA. So
Oh,
anytime there's yes, that's what I meant. Like that's why I will always remember this story, because I feel like I was just there, more than a couple of years ago. I was just there, and me myself calling each clinic,
mhm.
that was frightful, because I didn't have, a copy of the man's ID card. There was, a lot of missing information. And that's when I learned about also the importance of OSHA. There's certain work injuries I need to be reported to OSHA right away.
Yeah, something else you mentioned in that was about, this gentleman had been doing it for a really long time, and people, that we tend to worry less about the people that have been doing the job forever. And we do, I mean, when we know someone's newer to the trade, newer to the job site, we tend to pay more attention to them and make sure they're doing it right. And I don't think that would be the same for a man or a female for the first time they come on a job. Anyone's going to be overly cautious, making sure they're doing it right, until they learn their job. But we need to be looking at everyone, because sometimes it is those seniored members who tend to take the shortcuts because they have been doing it for so long. I know how to do this, right? Like, I've been doing this since you were in diapers, kid. How many times I heard that. But that's not what kept him safe. So I'm so glad to hear that he lived. And that, I mean, that had to be very traumatic for you, but I bet that also really shaped who you became as, the agent that you are, to help people, get through all of this and to get them set up so that they can avoid it.
Yes, it definitely helped me get into be grounded. I said the grounding part, having the documentation in place and having the action plan. So that's why I always pound my hands on the table in my videos and on social media, like having the risk management program, something in place to help you in case of an accident. Because you could, you could have, let's say, a perfect EMR, never had an accident the last 10 years, but you don't have a plan in place. And then when that bad luck crosses your path, now you end up, having a really bad situation in your hands, and you have no action or no steps on what to do, because it's your first time. So
Right.
you're worried, uh, you don't know what to do, and you put your business and your employee at risk.
Yeah, and, for the listeners, Rocio has some great videos on her LinkedIn profile, and there will be a link to her website and to her LinkedIn profile and to her Instagram account, all on the show in the show notes, today. So before we wrap up, though, my last question to you: what constructive behavior would you recommend to the listeners that would improve their success or the construction industry as a whole?
I would say listen, communicate and listen. I cannot express how many times communication is a really big component of, just life, but listening, you have to listen to everyone on the team, because, and then, like I always tell people, there's no right or wrong, because at the end of the day, with your team, and everybody is part of that team and makes a component of it. So you can't be putting, all gas to the metals, and not having any breaks when the people in the back are saying, hey, we need to slow down. Like we need to do something about it. So it's working in team and reminding your employees in your team as well that it's an open door policy. So if you see something wrong or you feel that we could change in some way, the door's open for us to collaborate, to know what we could do more. It's not just a one-man show.
Yeah, especially related to safety. I mean, there's always, when new people are coming into this industry, they may see something differently than we have seen it before, and they may have a great idea that would keep the workers more safe. And leaving that door open, and being open to those conversations and listening to their perspective. I think that's great advice to end with. Thank you so much for being part of this interview today. I hope that everybody learned from you, and I know that they're going to start following you because you have some great stuff. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much for having me, Lauren.
If you know someone that could benefit from this particular episode, then share it with them. Or if you want to continue to learn about the untapped and underutilized resources that will take your business to the next level, then follow the podcast. You don't want to miss an episode where we discuss what you needed to hear. And lastly, there is a link in the show notes that will allow you to reach out to me directly if you want to accelerate that learning curve. Thanks for listening. Talk soon.